like to introduce our program, which is, oh, is that right? Oh,
Yes.
good.
So they can come up and not be blind.
Yes, absolutely. So we have 4 women who are actually make up our 5 women who make up our program, Small Town to Big D, a panel discussion. And our moderator is Joe Reingold, a member of our board and one of our busiest volunteers. Joining her to tell their stories will be Syl Benenson, Eileen Ray, Schacter, and Nita Mae Tannebaum. So if you would welcome them to the stage.
While they're climbing up here, just for fun, how many of you were born and raised in a town, a city that was 10,000 or less? Raise your hand. Show of hands. You don't count. So. How many of you were born and raised in a town that was less than 5,000? Anybody? How many of you wanted to, as quickly as possible, get to the big city? Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about this evening.
How many people think when they were growing up Dallas was a small town?
Dallas was a lot smaller when I was growing up. We had less than 10,000 Jews. Just think about that for a minute. Less than 10,000 when I was growing up here. And now we're bigger than Houston. And anybody denies it? 63,000 about. Yeah, we've grown considerably. Nita Mae, we're going to take turns up here. Please tell us who you are, where you were from, and briefly describe what it was like while you were growing up.
Thank you. I am Nita Mae Tannebaum, and I was raised in Ponca City, Oklahoma. And Ponca City was on the Kansas border. The population was 26,000. It's still 26,000. And there were maybe 25, I don't know. But I got to Ponca City. My parents were from St. Louis, and then they went to Oklahoma City. And then they went to Ponca City. And my dad started a shoe store. And it was wonderful to be in Ponca City. I loved being from a small town. I didn't know anybody. I was 7, 8 years old. I had an older brother. And I was also the only Jewish girl in the city, in the town, in the high school, in the elementary school. So I really wanted to be really sure about that, so I went back through my Vesper services in high school and the graduation, and I looked through all the people, and sure enough, I'm still the only Jewish girl. So I really, when you want to know about how we got to Oklahoma City?
Yeah, what it was like in Ponca
Because we lived in Oklahoma City first, and one thing I want to tell you before I even go on any farther, for those of you who know me and know that my husband was Sam Tannebaum, we went to kindergarten together. And then my parents moved to Ponca City, and I never saw Sam again until our freshman year in college. So that's a long, just who knew? Anyway. I loved growing up in Ponca City. My dad had a shoe store. It was a small street, and everybody could go downtown, go into the drugstore, all that kind of thing, and everybody knew everybody else. And I still know a lot of people. The one thing that I remember the most is that when I was 7 or 8 years old, and this will be very short, that when I was 7 or 8 years old and we moved to Ponca City, the very first day that my mom took me to grade school, elementary school, the teacher's name was Mrs. Love, which was a beautiful thing. And I remember that the rest of my life now, since I have been a teacher for a long time. But the teachers in this small town were wonderful. Can I tell one more little story? Okay. When we first moved there, Jessica does know. When we first moved there, and it was long around about Christmas time, and in the grade school, they had a big, beautiful Christmas tree. And since they had found out that I was Jewish, they wanted me to be the star on the top of the tree. So somehow I rented it right to this little girl. And I went home and I told my mother, and then told my father, who then said, "You gotta be kidding." And my brother, oh my goodness, no. So my mother and my dad went up to school, and they compromised, and I got to be one of the stars.
Kay Schacter, same question.
Hi, I'm Kay Schacter. I'm from Hereford, Texas. Hereford, Texas is located in the panhandle of Texas, about 45 miles away from Amarillo. How we got there, my grandfather came over from Alsace-Lorraine, France. He looked like Alfred Hitchcock. He was a big man, couldn't ride a horse. That was important because my family had a ranch in Santa Rosa, New Mexico, the Moise family. So because he couldn't, the family lore is there was a gambling debt that was paid with a store in Hereford. And since my grandfather in France had worked in a corset store, he and his wife ended up in Hereford. My mother was born there. And what was it like? My grandfather had a general store in 1921. And my parents married in 48, and they started the ready-to-wear business there. So I was brought up, what was life like in Hereford? Well, it really revolved around the store. We knew everybody, and everybody knew us. I was well-traveled. Our store in Hereford was the Neiman Marcus of Hereford, Texas. And we opened the Amarillo store in 1971, and Trigere opened the store. May not mean anything to you, but all of our models were from Georgia Bullock, and it was quite a store. I was in Campfire Girls, Rainbow Girl Dropout. My brother was in Scouts, later in football, but as I said, our life revolved around the store. It was style shows and sidewalk sales. I remember my dad holding up a 42 Triple E bra and saying, "I want to meet the woman who wears this."
I'm Eileen Ray. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and all my relatives live there. My father's brother opened a scrap iron yard in McAllen, Texas. He moved down to the Rio Grande Valley and opened a junkyard there, and then he talked my my father's brother-in-law to come down and go to Brownsville and open a scrap iron yard there. And then finally, my dad, who worked in a shoe store when we were in St. Louis, they talked him into coming down, and he said, "Come to Harlingen and you can open one, and we'll have the 3 bigger cities in the Rio Grande Valley, and I'll have scrap iron." So that's what we did. Moved there when I was 5. My dad just packed us up and said, "We're going to Texas." So my relatives were having a fit, how can you leave St. Louis? But anyway, it was wonderful growing up in a small town because I was young and just was involved in Girl Scouts and so forth. And in high school, was in the pep squad, the annual staff, tennis club, a cappella choir, white teens, rainbow girls. Belonged to the country club so we could swim and eat dinner there. Went to slumber parties, and we go back to St. Louis every summer. We drive from Harlingen to Dallas, and once we hit Dallas, it was like New York City. One of these days, I'm going to live here. So, and one more day from Dallas to St. Louis, and then back again. But to me, Dallas was really like New York City. I couldn't wait to get here.
Syl Benenson.
I grew up in a small town in Mississippi, Lexington, 60 miles north of Jackson. Lexington had Jews starting, I would guess, in about the 1840s. And a temple was created in 1905, and it was reformed because there was no way for anyone to keep kosher or do anything else. And my family, my father was born there. He was one of 7 children. My family, Lexington is a county seat, and in every small town there's a courthouse. A courthouse in the middle of the square, and there were stores all around the square. And between my family, my parents, my grandfather had 2 stores, and I think most of the stores around the square were owned by either my family or other Jewish people. It was very ecumenical. I never, there was no anti-Semitism that I was ever aware of. I was involved with everything that went on, as you do in a small town. I was in the band, we all did everything. And we had a little country club as well. And it was a wonderful experience living in this town. And our Judaism, we had a rabbi that came once a month from Vicksburg. And it so happened this rabbi had been an assistant rabbi in Dallas, and I'll tell you about that later. But it was a wonderful way to grow up. Friends, everyone was friendly. There was, as I said, little towns, you support each other. If anyone's in trouble, everybody comes to your help to help you. And I can't think of a better experience than to live there. There's someone who's here, Sylvia Cohen, who grew up in Greenwood. My mother was born in Greenwood. You knew everybody in the state. And I'll tell you more about my Jewish experiences later.
Thank you. I'm going to condense this. To what degree was the Jewish community a part of your life growing up, and how has it influenced your life here in Dallas?
Forget I'm supposed to be talking to it. Anyway, to what extent the Jewish community has always been a part of my life, because the Jewish community was very important to my parents. And because I grew up in St. Louis with my grandparents and with everybody, that even though Eileen and I had many of the same experiences growing up, although we didn't know each other, but I went to St. Louis every summer also because Mom and Dad wanted me to go to a Jewish community. And Eileen and I both went to the movie on the same street, but we didn't know it. And this just went on and on like that when Eileen and I started talking about it. But the Jewish community was very important. I was asked to, did I ever want to be confirmed? I didn't know what confirmation was. And the rabbi from Oklahoma City came. And then every other weekend when I was 15 years old, I rode the train to Oklahoma City. And the rabbi took me in, and friends took me in, and I'm still very close to all of them. And I was confirmed when I was 15. And that was a wonderful thing, to have been a part of that community. And that has stayed with me. But anyway, community in Dallas then, when Sam and I got married and we moved to Dallas, it was just like, again, it was just very exciting. It was also very exciting that I didn't know what to do with this big city. And so that, as Syl says, I can tell you more about that later. But we did, we were taken into this community quickly. And from the Federation and the JCC and Temple Emmanuel, Rabbi Olin found out that I had been a teacher. And so he told Ray Israel, who was a religious school, and I got to teach. And I had no idea my first year out of college I was going to get to teach in a big congregation like that.
Well, as you can imagine, the Jewish population of Hereford, a town of 4,000, was 6. It was my grandparents, my parents, my brother, and myself. So to get to the synagogue, we had to travel to Amarillo, Texas, where Temple B'nai Israel is today. And it was an hour away. It was a small Jewish community of 100 families in which the synagogue had to it was a Reform synagogue, but it was for everybody, no matter what degree of observance you observed. So my fondest memories is High Holy Day services upstairs when the Amarillo Temple B'nai Israel was on Taylor Street downtown, because you had to go upstairs. And religious school, we had 8 kids, and everybody was in the clothing business. So there was a little bit of competition there, even though my parents were in the clothing business in Hereford. When I was in high school and I got my driver's license, I made it a point to volunteer in a religious school, and I didn't want to get paid, and I think the clock that they bought with the money that I worked for, that I would have earned, is still hanging there today. We came to Dallas as a family 30 years ago with our 4 children, and to us it was a Jewish Mecca, and it still is. We shopped around for synagogues because, this was new to us, and we put our children in Jewish schools. 3 of my 4 children are graduates of Jewish schools here in Dallas. I joined every Jewish organization here and was on boards of many of them. And I have currently been running the Judaica shop at Temple Emmanuel for 22 years. And that is strictly as a volunteer, and all the funds go to the sisterhood, which has helped educate rabbis, cantors, send kids to camp. I'm very proud of what we've done with that.
Well, growing up, we went to Temple in Mercedes, Texas, which was between Arlington and McAllen, about 45 minutes away. And we had a carpool. There were only 4 of us, 2 boys and 2 girls. And we went to Sunday school there and just carpooled. And then finally, Harlingen built a Temple. It was right across the street from the high school. And we'd go to Temple services there. Of course, the services were on Friday nights, and so were the football games. So my parents went to services, and I went across the street to the football game. And after services, they would close off the religious part of the temple, and in the back they would play poker. The men would play poker, and the ladies, of course, would play mahjong. So after services and after the football game, my parents would come and pick me up, and that was my religion. And there were no Jewish organizations there at all, no Hadassah or Ort or anything like that. But once a month we would go to Corpus Christi, and there was Young Judea, and my parents would take me there, and I would get to be around some Jewish kids. It was great. And then I went off to college. When I went to college, then to Dallas, and then I joined National Council of Jewish Women and B'nai B'rith Women. once I got married and we were living in Dallas.
Okay. Yep.
I observed Friday night services in my home. My father, we lit the candles and said the prayers every Friday night. We had, as I said, a rabbi that came once a month, but we had Sunday school every Sunday, and it was either my cousin or whoever was our teacher. But we did have people from little towns around that came. And during high holy days, we had a student rabbi that would come from the Union and would stay from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. So we had the high holy days were observed. We had as many as 80 people that would come when I was growing up from the little towns. Also, Jackson was not far away, and we started SOFTY, Southern Organization of Temple Youth. And we joined with Louisiana, so I knew every Jewish kid just about in Mississippi and Louisiana because we had conclaves. And I had family, a lot of family in Memphis, and that was my other Jewish connection. They had a Jewish sorority in high school called STP, and that was where I knew a lot of Jewish kids there. And it was a very ecumenical town. I went to Methodist Youth Fellowship on Sunday night, because that's where the kids went. I was even president of the town. It was no religion. And on Wednesday night, we went to the Presbyterian because they had hot dogs and whatever. And the Episcopal Church was about the same size as the temple, so their choir sang, and she's telling me it's time to stop. But I had a very good, growing up, I knew I was Jewish, everybody knew I was Jewish, and it was just part of who we were. And religion, it was a very ecumenical community, and I feel like Dallas has been that way to me as well.
In the essence of time, I'm going to ask this. Each of these ladies have a specific question for them rather than an overall question. So, and it was taken from their oral histories that they've done. And I'm giving a plug. If you haven't done your oral history, please do so. It's a lot of fun, it's painless, it's wonderful, it'll be online forever and ever, and everybody can watch it, and your families will be able to see it, and it's truly a wonderful thing to do. So Nita Mae, here's your question. In your oral history, you reference having to drive to services for the first time after you moved here. What was that like, having to adapt to the city's infrastructure?
When Sam and I first got married and moved to Dallas, all the congregations were building their own. This was in 1955. They were moving from South Dallas to North Dallas. So, the first time that I had ever been away from my parents on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur was that first time, and there were no congregation was really built. Yeah, so we went to State Fair of Texas, to the Fair Park, and went upstairs to the, whatever I'm trying to say. Anyway, there were 4,000 people, and the only one I knew was my husband. And that was really lonely. That was really scary. So, we went for Rosh Hashanah, and that was fine. We drove home. But then when it came time for Yom Kippur, I never, ever, ever not walked on Yom Kippur. And so sure enough, we went to services. Services were over. We had gone across the street, and you all know Fair Park, and you know there are hotels there, and there are lots, still today. And we walked across to the hotel, and We felt just really good about being in services, and some people were really nice to us, and everything was fine. And we went upstairs, went into the bedroom, and got ready to go to bed because we were tired, and I pulled the sheets down, and it was only bed bugs. So we pulled the sheets back down and went back downstairs and told the people we were leaving, and that was the first time I ever drove on Yom Kippur. And then I did from then on.
Okay. Sorry, what a visual. Okay, Kay. How do the Jewish communities that you've lived in, such as Amarillo, Boulder, Denver, and Dallas, compare in your experiences?
Well, in Amarillo, we were the Jewish family there. Carrie and I, we hosted a Parisian girl from Paris when she went to high school, and we had the only sukkah in the city outside of our own, within the synagogue. So my Jewish education really started when I got married, because Carrie had a conservative upbringing. When I went to college in Boulder, I didn't really feel like I fit in. I went to the Hillel once, and it was just it was uncomfortable. And then when I came back to Amarillo the second time, that's when Carrie and I married. And then living here in Dallas, like I said, it's just been a Jewish Mecca, and I'm very proud of being able to live here and what the friends we've made, the things we've accomplished, and it's just been great.
Eileen, your choice to move to Dallas as a bachelorette may seem pretty bold to some. What were the advantages and disadvantages to moving to Dallas on your own?
I really think the most bold I ever experienced, being bold, was going to college, because I was, for the first time on my own, I could do whatever I wanted, and it was just the freedom of being there. And I joined a Jewish sorority, and of course they had Jewish fraternities, so for once in my life I got to date Jewish boys for a change. And then moving to Dallas, two roommates from school, two sorority sisters and I, after school, decided we wanted to move to Dallas to be career women. So I got a job as a typist at Liberty Mutual Insurance Company, and they all got jobs, and we really had no disadvantages except we didn't have a car, but we took the bus everywhere. And I just loved living in Dallas, and it was bold, I guess, because we were all on our own. We paid rent in our apartment, and we had to go grocery shopping and so forth. So it was just the freedom of doing all that for the first time in my life, and got me ready for marriage. I met my husband 2 days before I moved to Dallas at my cousin's wedding in Brownsville. Excuse me. And he was from Dallas, so when I met him, I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "I'm from Big D." And I, "Okay, sucker, you're it," because I want to live in the big city. So anyway, 9 months later, we were married, and 9 months and 3 days later, my daughter came.
Okay. Syl, how has your early involvement with a variety of Jewish and non-Jewish faith-based organizations influenced your participation in the Jewish community here?
I won't go into all of them. No, I just saw somebody I know. I want to hear. No, I moved to Dallas. I went to University of Texas and knew a lot of people, and most of them are still my good friends. I was a speech therapist for several years, and got involved all immediately with Temple Emmanuel, and I'm got married, I guess 3 years after I moved here, and joined National Council of Jewish Women, which has been, I have spent most of my adult life involved with NCJW, which has been wonderful for me in so many ways, that it has given me the opportunity to be involved with many non-Jewish organizations to cooperate with. And I have been a volunteer for, I'd say, 55 years. And probably in everything from the city boards to senior stores to volunteer center to whatever. But I have always been so proud to say that I am Jewish wherever I go. And it makes me feel good to say, in fact, Rabbi Olin had a great influence on me because social action was his thing. And that's been my thing from all my life, to help other people and work with people to address needs that need to be taken care of. And I have been fortunate to work with wonderful people in this city, both Jewish and non-Jewish, to accomplish things. A clinic that became Parkland's first COPC neighborhood clinic, and there are now 12 of them. The National Council of Jewish Women, I can go on, and many of the people in this room I have worked with and hope I can continue to. I am 86 years old, and I hope that I will live as long as Rhea Wolfram, and that I can be as sharp as she is today. Thank you.
Here's the last question for each of the ladies up here. Nita Mae, you worked on the show Covenant. Can you please describe to us what the show is about and how your upbringing influenced your decision to create that program?
I'm happy to talk about one of the things that I found out I could do was I could teach and work full-time and learn also how to do a program on WFAA as a volunteer. Anyway, thank you. Anyway. I can talk pretty loud. Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Zion Balaban, and some of you will remember Zion and I were fast friends, as she was with a lot of people, and she was the assistant director of the Federation, Walter. Yes, she was. Anyway, in the 70s, this was in the 70s, there was something called equal access. And so all the Christian shows on Sunday morning, you know, every organization, every church got to put on a program, but none of us that were Jewish could. And so finally, Mike Shapiro, who was the head of WFAA and was Jewish, occurred to him that the Federation should put on a program, and he did. And the Federation gave us $3,000, and Zy and I, and sometimes Linky Seltzer, just went with it. And every single Jewish organization within any religious organization, any visiting celebrity, the Israeli dancers here at the center, anybody, I talked to every single one of them to say, don't you want to be on our program? And of course, nobody turned us down. So we hired a couple of people to be writers for scripts, and we hired other people to do a lot of other things. But more than that, WFAA gave us a producer, they gave us a director, they gave us anybody that we knew, and once a month we would trudge down to WFAA and we would we would do this program. And then it went out to all the small towns around Dallas and Tyler, Corsicana, every place. Because as a child growing up, I didn't have any place where I could find about anything about Jewish stuff. It was all Christian. And it occurred to me at some point when Mike said we could do that, Mike Shapiro, what a wonderful experience that I got to have to share all that with the little small towns around.
Kay, in your oral history, you describe yourself as the weird kid. What benefits in your experience are there to holding that particular name? I hope you don't consider that anymore.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious growing up the only Jewish kid other than my brother, who is a Christian. I think that says it all. I was the weird kid, and I didn't really fit, and I didn't really belong. Growing up a Jewish kid in a Christian community, Sunday school where I went, I only saw these kids once a week. I didn't really have a relationship with them either. I didn't have a solid Jewish foundation of knowledge, but my experiences led me to have a very strong belief in God and know that she was looking out for me. Being the only Jew in a Christian environment helped me to evaluate my identity and my value as a Jew. In Dallas, with all the wonderful opportunities here, I'm not the weird girl anymore. I fit and I belong. Thank you.
Eileen, you mentioned the Rainbow Girls, and I'm sure many people here do not know what that is. So please describe to us what that organization was all about.
The Rainbow Girls was a nonprofit service organization, and it was connected to the Masonic Lodge. So I guess my dad was a Mason, and that's how I got in. But what they believed in was hope, faith, and charity. So for hope is all you want out of life, to do whatever makes you happy, and the hope for the future. And with faith, you had to believe in a supreme spiritual being, which to me was God. There weren't any Muslims or Hare Krishnas or anybody in Harlingen. But if they believed in whatever they believed in, it was okay. And charity was just charity towards others. And one thing was, they didn't discriminate against me for being Jewish. That seemed to be okay. But there was a very popular girl that was a cheerleader. Her brother was a big football player, and they were Catholic, and they wouldn't let her join because we had a secret handshake, and they were afraid that she would go to confession and tell the priest with the handshake. They wouldn't let her join, but I guess they realized that I didn't have to confess to the rabbis, and they could care less about a handshake.